Hello, this is Kate Olson, and I'm here on the Embrace Change radio website, and we're about to do a soul talk, and I'm going to be talking with Jennifer Green, and we're going to talk about the benefits and drawbacks of self-improvement. I met Jennifer, I think it was 2018. We were both at the Integrative Health Symposium that was held in Boston at the Harvard Faculty Club. And Jennifer is also a life coach, and so we got sat at the same table, so I got a chance to talk to her and found out that we had a lot of things in common. And so I actually saw her post something about our Harvard talk recently, and after connecting, we decided that this topic of self-improvement would be interesting to talk about. So before we get started, I'm going to introduce Jennifer and let her tell you a little bit about herself. Hi, Jennifer.
Hello, hello. Thank you so much for having me, Kate. I am excited to be with you and your listener family. I will have to say, though, I'm actually using my nickname more these days than Jennifer. So I'm going by Mona. And it makes sense because it means blondie where I'm from. I'm originally from Colombia. And that's what we call blonde ladies down there. And I've been hearing it since I was a little girl. So I'm running with the name Mona Green. It feels more like me. And like you said, and like you said, I'm a coach. I created and run a company called Namasme, where we essentially find ourselves in the middle of the triangle of personal development, activism / service, community service, and art. And being at the intersection of those three things is really the direction where we're exploring in the future and where we're excited to invest a little bit of our energy moving forward. So stoked to be here today to talk about a topic that's very near and dear to my heart. And I'm happy to start wherever the conversation will take us.
Okay, well, for people like us especially, but I think it's kind of a trend in our society these days, it's easy to get addicted to self-improvement. It's exciting and it feels good, and there's always more to do.
Definitely. I remember kind of the experience that prompted me to start asking the bigger questions and to start digging a little deeper into my heart and into my brain. It was caused by a very difficult family situation that I had to deal with starting, I believe it was 2009. And just like you said, there is that exhilarating feeling to the discovery of self.
Mm-hmm.
As you peel back the layers, particularly at the beginning, you have all of these aha moments that it give us a sense of being understood for the first time, even if it is just ourselves doing the understanding.
Yes, actually.
And so it is very easy to get addicted to it because you're answering the why behind some of the bigger questions that you have. Why do I do this? Why do I feel that way? And like you said, though, it's one of those things where the deeper you dig, the more questions you uncover. And so it's this constant process. And definitely one that needs to be stewarded carefully because of that as well.
Yes, it is necessary to, know yourself and be self-aware in order to be able to, have good relationships with other people and be aligned, and, just it's really a necessary part of life.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're constantly in the process of it, it is a little bit, it's easy to get so centered on that
Mm-hmm.
you're um, maybe not looking around you as much as.
Absolutely. And that's exactly the place where I, as a human being, arrived not too long ago. And also just by virtue of observing my community, which is full of coaches and healers and helpers of all sorts, I realized, this work is very noble in its intention.
Mm-hmm.
It has tremendous benefits in the sense that your relationships improve, starting with the relationship that you have with yourself, and you develop better ways of dealing with the up and down roller coaster that is life. But that it is fairly easy to get just caught in that bubble of all of the stuff that you've identified that you want to work on and that you're consistently trying to improve upon all the time. And so I noticed in my own process, I derived a lot of benefits from being proactive in my approach to my personal development. But I also found it really interesting how often I was in my head and not realizing the bigger picture, and how my sense of self was really just me. And I wasn't looking a little bit, if we were talking about concentric circles, maybe one or two circles out. And that was exactly what prompted this change in the way that I coach and the direction that I'm taking my company, because I think we're at a point in the world right now and in our history and what is going on requires us to think bigger, and is requiring us to expand our sense of self, not just to our nuclear families, but beyond that. We're social animals. We're the social fabric we're all a part of is intricately woven and connected, and our healing and work needs to reflect that as well.
Yeah.
The so much of spiritual philosophy and thought always talks about, there's even like a Rumi quote that is, at first I was naive and I thought I would change the world, but now that I am wise, I'm going to change myself first. Yeah, but when do you ever get to the point where you're satisfied with the change that you've made to yourself to then shift priority?
Yeah, it can't be I'm waiting until I get done with me. How I came to this realization was actually before I became a coach, but I still was always, interested in self-improvement and, did a lot of things in that regard. And I was actually dating a man who was a psychologist.
Mm-hmm.
And he was a very nice man, a lot of good qualities, had gone through a extensive process in his own life of self-improvement.
Mm-hmm.
And he had gotten a lot out of that process, but he was kind of stuck in it. He didn't want to deal with anything that didn't directly relate to his own self-improvement. And, that was kind of offensive, to me as a person who was trying to relate to him, And it occurred to me not only that I was sort of offended by that, that he was, if it didn't apply to his own personal development, he wasn't really interested.
Mm.
And it occurred to me that a lot of us, maybe at different times, or maybe all the time,
Mm-hmm.
but get in that point where,
Where it's the bubble of me, right?
Yes.
Yeah. And to add to that, one of the things I've noticed in myself and also in some of the members who have a similar occupation in my community is it's also easy to get a little self-righteous. I'm on the path. I have figured out the big truths. I am so wise. And the second that you start pontificating rather than
Yeah.
humbly guiding and allowing whatever wants to come forth from the person who you're actually helping,
Mm-hmm.
is the second the path is telling you you've got more work to do. And
Yeah.
so it's been an interesting journey where I've seen it in my family, for example. I live my life a little bit differently than my nuclear family, and my primary focus has been that of myself and getting to a healthy, stable, happy, grounded place as a human being.
Mm-hmm.
And through the course of that, studying different philosophies, spiritual traditions, et cetera, et cetera. And I'm coming from a very, very different direction than the place where I was raised. And I found that I have to really check myself when I go home to not turn into this preachy, look at what you're doing wrong, look at what you're doing wrong, look at what you're doing wrong place. And it's become a really beautiful experience and honestly practice to observe that about to happen and be able to pull the reins just a little bit and be like, you don't want to go there, girl. But also, learning to kind of like what you said at the beginning of this conversation, that the work is never really done.
Even if you think it is.
Right. But also being able to rest and take a breath with the work that you have done already and to feel good about it.
Yes.
One of the positive things that you get out of devoting your life to becoming a better, kinder, more compassionate human being, other than the obvious benefits, is the fact that every once in a while you get to breathe a little bit lighter and you get to walk a little bit lighter, because as you heal stuff, as you integrate whatever traumas you may have gone through, you're a lot less reactive to your environment.
Yes. And it doesn't have to be, and probably it's better if it's not a, like aggressive pursuit. It should be a flow. You don't have to always be, oh, I need to improve this, I need to improve that. You can just wait and see what
what life is telling you needs work. I
yes.
completely agree with you. I posted something, I think last week, about that, because I had a song coming through. I was just playing around with my guitar and these lyrics came out, and it's really all about learning to just be still enough to listen to what life is telling you.
Yes.
To invest your energies, right? Because your circumstances tell you where you need to go. We're really good at this mentality of doing and fixing and the go-getter approach to it, there's this book by a woman by the name of Sally Kempton called Awakening Shakti, and it's all about the divine feminine energy and the different archetypes as seen through the lens of the Hindu goddesses. Mm-hmm. But in the beginning of the book, she talks a little bit about what that means energetically in terms of the masculine as well. And something that she said really resonated with me and is kind of piggybacking off of what you said, which is, the approach needs to be somewhere in the middle. There's the aspiring, so the work, the yoga of it, the having a practice, the making the space for it, the discipline and the structure.
Mhm.
But there also has to be the meditation, the inspiration, the observation. So it's like you effort, but you also get quiet and receive, and you effort and receive, and you effort and receive. And that's ultimately also the healthiest way of doing it, because then that prevents what we were talking about earlier, the self-obsession with the doing.
Yes. When I first started my coaching business, I wanted to make sure I had all the tools that I needed. So I kept taking all of this training, just always new training. And at one point, it occurred to me that I hadn't really implemented most of it.
Right.
So I had to just, stop all the training and implement the things that I had already learned.
Yep.
And
No, that's huge. And I see that a lot, particularly here in Los Angeles, in the field of personal development. A lot of people are now starting to, for example, experiment with plant medicine or breath work, or you go on this retreat for 2 weeks and it's life-changing, but then you come back to your normal life and you just go right back into how it was before without really taking the time to apply what it was that came through that inspired channel. It's like, where did that inspiration find its way into your practice? Because if you're not embodying whatever wisdom came through, it's like your heart got cracked open, but that's all it did. It didn't get stronger. It didn't get more useful to your community. It just provided a new awareness, which has a lot of value. But it's limited in its scope and in its ability to serve. So I completely agree with you on that. That's definitely something that I try to be very vigilant of, not just in my own personal practice, but with my clients. I actually, for now, contractually require them not just to do the hour of coaching a week, but now they're doing an hour of some sort of community service a week as well. And that's what I'm calling the dojo. That's where you go, all that stuff we talked about, all those beautiful seeds that we planted. Mm-hmm. Now you get to go put them in practice. And it's beautiful to witness what happens when we create an intentional space for that. So I'm really excited about that.
Yeah, I saw your post about that, and yeah, that's good. And I know what you mean about, okay, you say something or tell something, and then watch what happens when your client sets it in motion. And there's a part of it that, okay, you knew that this worked, because otherwise you wouldn't have said it, but still in seeing it, it's kind of like, oh, that really worked.
Absolutely. And your body gets the data. One of the things that we have to be really mindful of also considering and incorporating into our personal development process is the fact that it's not just psychology that we're dealing with. You can't think your way out of the issues that you've created in your life, partially because so much of your trauma and your habits and everything have actual chemical reactions in your body. Your nervous system actually needs the data that it is okay to think differently, that it is not just okay, that it's safe and potentially fun. That's why I added like that art piece to the work that I do. It doesn't, I find that one of the biggest objections that I get when I talk to strangers about the work that I do, and they're like, why would I want to open that door? That just sounds like a whole lot of crap I don't want to think about.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, understandable. But it's not like the stuff inside's going anywhere. So it's important to also communicate. Like, yes, it can be a very difficult process, but it can also be full of joy. And it can be fun, and it can turn into a creative playtime of sorts. If you're willing to have a sense of humor about it and learn to laugh at yourself a little bit, because at the end of the day, we're all kind of silly humans trying to figure out this incredibly complex yet very simple thing called life. And then that's it. There's no real point
I
to
think
it.
a lot of people don't realize that that stuff that they decided to put away because they didn't want to deal with it is affecting them. It's affecting their health and their mental attitude and all of that. But they think, okay, I just let that, they didn't let it go. They let it sit.
Right. They just, swept it under the rug, but the rug is now a mountain because there's so much stuff underneath, and it's not just affecting them. Like, you do see disease come from stress,
Yeah.
but it affects their families. It affects their relationships. I think one of the most responsible things that we can do as people, if we really do claim to care about and love the people that we say that we care about and love, then why on earth would we not want to show up for them as the best possible version of ourselves? Like, if you have a hard time making that decision for you, fine. Take one for the team and do the work. Because whether you're conscious about the effect that that stuff has on your life or not, it is present. The trauma that you have suffered is present in the way that you react to stressors in your life. It's present in the way that you think, in the way that you educate, in the way that you define things like happiness, love, and success. I mean, that's life. Like, that's what life is about. So
that is true, but that's one of the awarenesses that has to change for a lot of people, is knowing that they have to deal with that stuff, that you have to deal with your feelings, that they won't just go away if you ignore them. And sometimes
absolutely.
they think that, okay, I'm under stress, I don't know how I'm going to pay the bills, but I don't want anybody to know. That's why I'm acting like a total,
Mm-hmm. Right. But something like, okay, the bills, your job, the stress of maybe having kids, all these little things singularly may not look like a lot, but they pile on. And your diet and all of these factors then become this heavy energy that you carry around. And more research, going back to the body and the importance of considering the body as a tool for healing and integration as well, is epigenetics tells us that whatever you didn't deal with is literally going to be passed down if you procreate. So if you at some point would like to become a responsible parent, and try to eliminate as much unnecessary trauma from your children's life before they even get started on this thing, then doing the work it should be a requirement in my mind.
Yeah.
And it should also be something that we're teaching in schools. I was very pleasantly surprised to go back home and visit my family, and to learn that in my niece's school, she's 5, they devote some time every week to helping them develop skills like compassion and empathy.
Good.
I was like, go US, there is hope.
Yes. But see, things like that, things like you can learn compassion and empathy. They didn't know that before. I don't know why, but they didn't. And also things like they used to think that, okay, we get these genes and that's the way it is. If you get that particular gene, that's the way you're going to be, and your kids are going to inherit whatever it is. And
right. And almost like a fatalistic sense of, well, I am who I am, and that's the way that it is. I think that's one of the most dangerous things that you can say as a human being. I've always been that way. Whenever somebody says that to me, I'm like, bing, and it's like my antennas go up, and I willingly engage, because we're nothing if not malleable. Our brains are malleable, our gene expressions are malleable, and we're starting to see the power of belief and thought in the expressions of our genes. We're starting to see how our diet makes it easy for certain parts of our genes to turn on and turn off. Hence, stuff like cancer and other types of maybe even autoimmune diseases. So there's no real evidence supporting the old way of looking at this anymore. And I think as a society, we really do need to step up collectively, because if we can manage just a micro shift in the way that we operate collectively, a lot of our problems as a world society wouldn't be that bad anymore.
Yeah. Yes, we have a lot of room to improve.
Yeah, you can say that again. Absolutely.
But just as we know with individuals, it has to happen when they're ready.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah,
this
and I think that's part of what people like you and I also need to understand in the way that we present the value of our services and present what it is that we help people do, and that we learn how to communicate the process for as satisfying as it can be as well. They are scary doors to open, but your freedom's also at the other end.
Yeah.
And we have to get better at communicating that as coaches, psychologists, psychiatrists, healers of all sorts. It's not enough that we're holding down that space. We have to get louder, because if the world doesn't need healing now, when has it ever?
Yeah.
We're more polarized and divided, it seems like, than we ever have been. And moving forward, if we can just agree that the common denominator in all of our problems societally is us, and that if we start tackling just that piece alone, that we're being activists in a way that we can have a direct impact with, that's a pretty good place to start. Like, we're not going to figure it all out, but we can at least try, and we should all get on board with at least making that proactive effort.
It definitely is. And, everything you've said there is definitely true. That little agreement part seems to be the hard part right now.
And I think one of the positive things about this process of getting to know yourself is that a lot of what is available to us in terms of teachings and wisdom is not politicized. It's not, it can come from different religious backgrounds, but the core teachings available to us, the psychology available to us, the science available to us, there is enough there for all of us to reach some sort of a consensus on. It doesn't, I don't care who said it or where it came from, if it just feels true.
Yeah.
And if it's positive and useful, why wouldn't I want to incorporate it into my life,
Yes. Honestly, I do believe that at the core, most people want the same thing.
Agreed.
Yes. Yes.
We all want to be safe. We all want to be seen, and we all want to be loved.
Mm-hmm.
That's it. It's that simple. And so many of our problems, both as individuals and societally, are because we don't feel one of those three things.
Yes.
You know, and we no longer trust each other like we can.
Big time.
So yeah, we have our work cut out for us.
Yeah, well, you know, I've heard this more than once, that the world needs coaches.
I remember when I went to coaching school, it's going to be now like 6 years ago, they said that coaching was the fastest growing industry in the United States after tech. And I'm not surprised. I do think that we are waking up to the fact that the way that we live and the way that we relate is no longer sustainable for us, for the planet, for each other, and that something has to change.
And I just had a meeting with somebody yesterday, and apparently the tech industry really needs coaching.
And I know a lot of people in that space in San Francisco for that reason. You know, I find it really heartening, actually, that there's a big concentration of coaches here in LA and in San Francisco. In San Francisco, because they're influencing a lot of what is being created. In LA, because we're influencing culture. If you think about it, the US in general, but LA in particular, being the center of media that it is the primary exporter of culture in the world. You know, what happens in Hollywood definitely gets disseminated far and wide, and people get access to that. Right. Yeah. And so I'm, from a personal standpoint, really happy to see those little nooks have such a saturated coaching market in a good way. You know, I don't need to be the person who coaches everybody, as long as, you know, the work is being done. And I'm happy to see it also starting to take root in places that have traditionally been a little bit less open to stuff like therapy, like, for example, Latin America. You know, just a couple of years ago, the topic of therapy was still kind of taboo. It's this cultural thing where asking for help is still not socially acceptable, but coaching being, I guess, the more digestible cousin of psychology makes it easier for people to say, oh yeah, I have a coach, instead of I go to the psychologist and I get therapy.
Yeah, that's true.
So, you know, it is nice to see that conversation's shifting and opening up, because the work is good and the work is necessary.
So we're kind of getting to the end of our time. I try to keep these reasonably short, although they're usually topics that we could talk about for a long time.
Ooh, days.
Is there something that you would like to say as a last statement?
Yeah. I guess I'd just like to reiterate the fact that we oftentimes think of this work as something that we do for ourselves, but it's really not. It has far-reaching consequences, and that our freedom really is at the other side of these somewhat scary doors to open, and that the ripple effects of us learning to slow down and observe and become more compassionate with ourselves benefit our friends, our families, our romantic relationships, and society at large. And if you are listening and you consider yourself somebody who wants to see a better world, then, you know, hop on the train. We've got cookies.
Yes, that. And if you want to see a better world, do something.
Yes. Yes. Let's stop with the keyboard activism and actually embody these things that we are discovering are
Don't
important.
just complain about it or
Yes,
say
agreed.
somebody should do something.
Mm-hmm.
You're somebody.
Yeah, yeah. All right. Well, thank you so much for having me on, Kate. I really
Yes, thank you
appreciate it.
for coming and talking about this. This was actually Jennifer's idea, so I'm glad that she thought of this and we had a chance to talk about it. And so I'm just going to say goodbye and we'll talk to you again.
Sounds good.
Have a good day.
You too.